Now, a reporter said that the United States has authorized the transfer of billions of dollars worth of bombs and fighter jets to the state of Israel. And this comes even as Washington is publicly expressing some serious concerns about the Israeli military offensive into Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. The report further says that the new arms package includes more than 1,800 Mk-84 2,000-pound bombs and about 500 Mk-82 500-pound bombs. The package comes as the Israeli nation is facing strong international criticism over its continued bombing campaign and the ground offensive in the Gaza Strip, which has resulted in the deaths of over 32,000 Palestinians. Now, some members of President Joe Biden's party have also called on Prime Minister Netanyahu to cut the dependence on U.S. military aid. Biden has, however, vowed to continue supporting the state of Israel despite an increasingly public rift with Netanyahu. Now, Washington, remember, gives a staggering $3.8 billion in terms of annual military assistance to the state of Israel, which is its long-term ally and the strongest nation in the Middle East, with the help of the Americans. Now, the White House has declined to comment on the weapons transfers. The weapons delivery to the state of Israel follows a visit to Washington by the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant this week. Now, as part of his visit, Gallant reportedly discussed Israeli weapons needs with the American counterparts. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has also authorized for an Israeli negotiating delegation to travel to the state of Qatar and Egypt in the coming days. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister's office has said in a statement that this is to hold talks on the release of hostages that are still held in the Gaza Strip. Now, last week, the Israeli Mossad director David Barnea and also the Shin Bet director Ronan Bar had returned to the state of Israel without a breakthrough in indirect ceasefire hostage talks with Hamas. All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outson, who's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and also the Jamestown Foundation, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Now, Colonel Outson, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this broadcast. Now, it's very interesting to look at this strange sort of a mismatch between what the United States has been saying and doing, and also in terms of the weapons deliveries that the United States has been continuing to do with the state of Israel. On the one hand, we witnessed the United States, which did not use its veto at the UNSC Council, asking for a resolution for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And now it appears that the United States is sending more weapons to the state of Israel, including those 2,000-pound bombs.
Yes, well, it's good to be with you. And to be honest with you, I think it's not a new pattern in U.S.-Israeli relations. It's actually quite an old pattern. If you look back to some of Israel's wars in the last century, in 1973, 1982 in Lebanon, you would see quietly a very strong and unquestioned really U.S. support militarily for Israel's efforts, but behind the scenes a great deal of pressure to limit military operations and to wrap them up quickly. Especially in the 1982 war in Lebanon, during President Reagan's tenure, he was putting big pressure on the Israelis to stop, and they really didn't listen very well. But at no point did it come to an absolute breach where the U.S. cut off all arms and support. Now, what we've seen in the last 20 years has not been in that mode because it's been unquestioned support for Israel, and Israel hasn't had big wars like this. So I don't think that this is that unusual. And yes, there's an apparent contradiction, but not a real one, because what's going on is the Biden administration is trying to get some concessions out of Netanyahu on things like protection of civilians during any Rafah operation,
right,
and potentially to just not do the Rafah operation at all. And the only way to do that is through some public protestations and public pressure while still giving the assurance of military aid.
You know, it's interesting for people who are watching this from the other parts of the world is to have, the United States seems to be saying one thing, but it is doing completely another, because Joe Biden has gone on record to state that Israelis carrying out a ground invasion into the Rafah Strip, into Rafah in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, will be a red line. But if that is a red line, then how do the Americans intend to stop it? Because on the one hand, they say it's a red line, but at the same time, they're sending in more weapons.
Well, President Biden was vice president at the time that President Obama at the time, put a red line down in Syria as well. So let's just say that this particular foreign policy team, the people around them and the principals on the Biden Obama team and in their orbit is not known for really sticking to red lines. The red line has rhetorical value for emphasizing something they really want to message as critical. But I think everybody knows that they're not actually going to apply real pressure, turn the screw, so to speak, on Israel with regards to economic aid or military aid.
And also, if you look at some of the comments that have come in, from some of the other political leaders within the United States of America, Bernie Sanders, for instance, has said that the United States is complicit with what the state of Israel is doing with American weapons on the Palestinian people. And also Chuck Schumer, the highest ranking Jewish official within the American political system, he said that probably Netanyahu has in fact lost his way in this war. A lot has been said about how this war is actually affecting the relationship between the United States and the state of Israel. Do you think this war has at all damaged the equation that the United States has with Israel?
I think it has. Now, there's still, in my view, broad bipartisan support for Israel to ensure that Hamas does not rule the Gaza Strip. I think that still is a popular proposition among most Democrats and nearly all Republicans. But nobody's impressed with how Israel has gone about this. I think the lack of preparation that led to the surprise attack, and of course that's not an attack that Israel invited, that is an attack that Hamas carried out and in a terroristic fashion. I want to be clear about that. But it was laxity on the part of the Netanyahu government that led to the vulnerabilities for that. And then subsequently, I think that there has been discomfort with the level of civilian casualties caused during the operation. Now, it's not like the Americans' hands are entirely clean of this if you look at the wars in Iraq and Syria. But still, I think that it has damaged Israel's standing somewhat in terms of their ability to carry this out effectively.
Right.
It's also the lack of plan for the day after that we see from the Netanyahu team. So yeah, Israel's friends for sure have been discomfited by the way this has played out, and that's going to take some time to repair.
And my final question to you, Colonel Loudzin, is, the UNSC passed a resolution without the Americans vetoing it that there should be a ceasefire. So what happens to that UNSC resolution? The world over, it's understood that the UNSC resolutions are binding.
That's right. Unless sanctions, multilateral sanctions are authorized or military operations, then the UN resolutions really have sort of a moral force, but no practical force. And so I think this is another one of those. It is a telling statement that the U.S. administration refused to veto this, and it is about as strong a statement of disapprobation that you'll see come out of Washington towards Jerusalem. But that said, there's still enough rope, so to speak, on the leash from Washington to say, wrap this up, finish it. There's not immediate pressure from Washington to end this, but to do it smarter and to bring it to a conclusion sooner rather than later.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel Loudzin, for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you, Mohammed.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.